Padawan's Pride is the first audiobook, audio drama, audiobook junior novel thing from Audible, which has also put out a couple other audiobooks taking place during the High Republic era. Obviously, as you guys may have seen on my channel lately, I've been looking at some of the Jedi Quest novels, and since this dropped while I was listening to them with virtually no notice from Audible, I felt I had to put this in here and review it. Unlike Jedi Quest though, which is a Legends book, this is part of Disney's new modern Star Wars continuity, so if you watch these as they drop or something, this book takes place in the same time period as Jedi Quest, but is notably in a different timeline, so it won't reference events from those books. The book was written by Brian Q. Miller, a writer who has worked on a vast variety of projects, largely in the universe of DC Comics before this, having had worked on Smallville and Arrow for the CW, also writing comics like the disappointing Red Robin run from 2009, which is good exclusively for its kick-ass covers in Red Robin costume, along with some other stuff, like one of the Netflix He-Man shows he worked on. I don't know much about He-Man. Padawan's Pride takes place in 29 BBY and features Anakin and Obi-Wan tasked with saving a Republic intelligence officer undercover in a small Pike offshoot, working with a disgraced Hutt, Nefeg the Hutt. Anakin proves to be the best person for this mission, as it involves a level of freedom and excitement he craves, along with a new opportunity to showcase his talent as an expert pod racer. Obi-Wan pretends to be Anakin's assistant as Anakin pod races and tries to make his way up the ranks, both giving the duo cover to be there but also access to many of the criminals running the underground pod racing ring as a way to find this Republic agent. Anakin must maintain good enough scores to stay in the game, but not so good that his cover is blown. Though they only know Anakin as the pod race kid from Tatooine and not as a Jedi as he is these days. They also find the deeply injured and tortured intelligence officer Yargle eventually, with Anakin and Obi-Wan eventually managing to bring the thing down and arrest Nefeg and the leader of the racket, Baron Grot. Anakin in this book is reliving his pre-Jedi life a bit, with him getting back into a pod racer. Something that cheers him up a bit, since he's getting a little bitter that the Jedi initially chastised him and didn't want him in the Order despite the potential that his deceased savior Qui-Gon Jinn saw in him. This has also led him to doing some shit the Jedi are none too pleased about, like jacking a ship to race around in, since he still has a little of that old adrenaline junkie we met on Tatooine in The Phantom Menace. Though while Anakin is kind of a little shit, he also has the heart of a Jedi at this point, as when he's found out by the other pod racers in the Pike, he trades his freedom to race in order to protect the Republic spy they came to rescue in the first place. I like that Anakin is kind of between two worlds, the world of the racer, where his skill in both piloting and the Force could lead him to glory and fame, and the world of the Jedi, which to this point, a couple years after The Phantom Menace, is still full of doubt internally and externally for many of his detractors in the Order as well as himself. I think this also subtly shows that from the get-go, Anakin had issues with the Jedi Order, which I think is important from tracing Anakin's history from the kid on Tatooine to the super cyborg Hitler man he becomes in the OT. Obi-Wan is along for the ride and is mostly just trying to babysit a difficult yet gifted student in Anakin, with Anakin poking at him a bit when he makes Obi-Wan his manservant, or so the Hutt and the Pikes think. Anyway, he also has some doubts that Maul was the last Sith, knowing there were always two, and wondering about the potential second Sith and his identity, though that is almost totally irrelevant to the book, so they don't really dwell on that too much, though there's little themes of that in here. Nefeg the Hutt is sort of the main villain, if there is one. He runs these races and has been disgraced by the other Hutts, more or less, trying to create his own syndicate, allying with the Pikes, and just kind of running this extreme pod racing circuit since he has nothing better to do. Nefeg is honestly just here to explain the fact that Anakin needs to race, the pod racing being the bulk of the story. There really isn't anything too special about him, to be honest. Ringer is a droid Anakin befriended, and probably the second lead that is barely notable. He probably has similar amounts of story to Obi-Wan, which is to say not very much. He sacrificed himself for Anakin near the end of the book, but Anakin manages to have him repaired. He was a nice little exposition dump, though, in the few scenes Anakin has with him between races, and Obi-Wan couldn't be around, so it kind of functionally made sense for him to kind of get an ally on the inside. Other than that, there are various racers featured in the book to differing degrees. One thing that is nice is that the racers featured have some character. Some admire the kid who won the Boonta Eve Classic, some hate him, but when it turns out the race has some serious stakes, they also fear the consequences of losing, and that becomes a factor. We don't get a ton from these other racers, but everybody kind of has something to say and something to do. With all that said, though, unlike the Jedi Quest books, the book's stakes and themes are more kiddish and skew a bit younger. Death, destruction are more implied than realized. Racers are taken away if they fail and fed to critters, but that isn't really explored in graphic detail the way Jedi Quest sometimes would. It was definitely much more appropriate for elementary kids, though with this being exclusive to card-holding Audible Premium members like myself, it's a bit odd. I have a hard time imagining it hitting that elementary school target demographic very much, unless you have a kid who likes Star Wars and you for some reason want to play them an audiobook rather than letting them do what they really want to do, which is watch Skibbity Toilet or play Fortnite. The pros for the races are good, and Brian Miller dreamed up some cool tracks, describing one as being a zero-G's race between moons. Pod racing was also such a staple of Star Wars circa 1999 that was kind of a fad within the franchise that never really gets touched anymore, except in like a joking manner occasionally. So I found it kind of fun to revisit the concept 25 years on from the hype during the Phantom Menace era. I don't really have much more to say, honestly. It's incredibly skippable, unless, like me, you have Audible and are really looking for Star Wars content. Like I said, the pod race stuff was really cool, but the book mostly just failed to really connect and definitely doesn't show us much of Anakin's Jedi training in canon, the same way the Jedi Quest series did in Legends, so overall I think it's fairly skippable.